Well, thanks to everybody for showing up on the web here. My name is Rick Lenore, and I'm one of the owners here at MRW Lawns. And we're broadcasting live tonight from not downtown La Plata, but beautiful La Plata. Today was a rather gray, dark, rainy, cool day, but think on the bright side, because that gives you an extra day to get your crabgrass preventer down. So this overall, this year has been kind of warm, and the weeds are going to start germinating here pretty quickly. Anyway, tonight we're going to talk about how to create a beautiful lawn out there. And I know some of you are already customers. You have a program going, and if you're not a customer, you're welcome to become one, we'll be more than happy to take care of your lawn for you. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things. I always start off my talks talking about the benefits of having a fine lawn, and it's important that we take care of our lawns, especially in the suburban areas. Not so much maybe in the urban areas, because there's plenty of buffer between you and the streams and things, as long as you're not you don't have the cows going through the streams and things. But it's important that in the suburban areas that we really take care of our lawn, so that the dirt doesn't erode away, and we get a lot of benefit from our applications. First of all, taking care of the lawn. Lawn is important erosion control. If you didn't have lawn around your house, you'd have dirt, and that you don't want the dirt to erode. That's where a lot of your pollution actually comes from. Grass actually gives a cooling effect in the summertime, and then it also helps the water quality and purification. It's a carbon sink, and it absorbs carbon dioxide. It releases oxygen. It's going to increase your property value, and you maintain it for pest control, and it improves the structure. So the most important ones there are the top four, I think, and especially the erosion control and water quality are important for our natural areas. Here it is. That thick root system, there's 185 million to 49 billion shoots of grass per acre, and that's what makes it such an efficient runoff and erosion preventer. It's important that in our suburban areas, where we have so much impervious surfaces, the streets and the sidewalks, where water is allowed to just run off down the storm drain, that we have pervious areas like lawn, where the water can actually soak in, and it impedes the movement of that water out there. Okay, I love this picture. This is an aerial picture of a neighborhood in Baltimore, and you can see what's happening. This guy's doing pretty good. He might even have a lawn care company. It's pretty straight, but there's still, some areas where they might have skipped with the spreader. But you can see what happens when you use a broadcast spreader here that's not quite working right. And down here, this is definitely a guy using a drop spreader and not overlapping. But if fertilizer moved off of turf areas, like some people believe that it does, you wouldn't see that striping. The lawn, it would pretty much leach and kind of leach together, and it wouldn't stripe like that. So this picture is testament that turf grass roots do what they're supposed to do. And as long as you get it on the lawn and you keep it off the street and the sidewalk, putting it on the street and the sidewalk allows it to wash down, and it'll go right into that storm drain. Okay, but as long as you keep it on the lawn, it's going to stay put where it's supposed to be and be taken up by the grass. Okay, so when you think about your neighborhood and your drainage of your neighborhood, this is what most people are most concerned about, and that's the stormwater runoff. And it's important that we really do think about where our stormwater goes. The problem with the Anacostia River in southeast DC is that most of the storm drains go right directly into the river. And we've learned from that, but still we continue to have a problem with runoff of streets and of hard surfaces because you start to get that volume of water. If it runs in an area that can erode, it causes problems. So most of our neighborhoods down here in Charles County and in the southern Maryland area pretty much are going to run off to some type of sediment pond, and that's a pretty good thing. However, it's not foolproof, and we need to be aware of what happens when it rains in our neighborhoods. Okay. Now, this picture is really a good one because it really depicts what happens when your lawn is neglected. The two nutrients that your lawn needs the most are the ones that are blamed for the problem in the Chesapeake Bay. Nitrogen is the first one, and that's the nutrient that your lawn needs the most. The second one is phosphorus, and they're represented on your fertilizer bag as the first number on the fertilizer bag and as the second number. It's important to note that phosphorus is very tightly bound to the soil. So that means by being bound to the soil, you're not going to lose phosphorus unless you lose soil. And this picture really shows a lawn that has no root system. It actually has too many trees in the back, so it's hard to get a lawn to grow, I guess, if they've tried. But the soil is just eroding completely off of there. And a lawn that like this is going to lose tons, absolutely tons of phosphorus that are going to go down the storm drain and eventually make its way into the water system and into the Chesapeake Bay. Whereas if you had a good root system, it's proven fact that if you control erosion, you control that phosphorus from running off. And so, you know, it's the message here is that you need to fertilize your lawn good enough so that you're going to hold the soil and that you're not losing the soil to erosion. All right, so on the other side, it's important to point out that if you are going to keep a good lawn, and if you want a immaculate lawn during the hard times of the summertime when we're seeing outbreaks of disease and it's dry and you know, the lawn's going through a lot of stress, that you're going to need to do some additional inputs. This is a very common summertime disease called brown patch, and it needs to be said that it takes a very long time for brown patch to actually get down into the crown and into the roots of the plants where it can do permanent damage and kill the lawn. Okay, we are going to kill the lawn worse by our mowing practices rather than brown patch if you have a problem with brown patch in the summertime. Now, once again, this if you've ever seen the disease triangle, the triangle says that you have to have a host, you have to have a pathogen, and you have to have the proper weather. Well, the proper weather for brown patch to develop is those very hot, humid days where it just seems like things don't dry out. And the reason that it likes that weather is because the pathogen that causes these brown spots, the grass just doesn't, it loves when the grass doesn't dry out. So it has plenty of time to infect and cause these brown areas. So cultural practices that need to be done here, probably turn off the sprinkler system so much. I think this is a guy that had a sprinkler system. He's watering at night, watering shallow in the summertime. We're going to talk more about how to water. And, you know, if you're watering at night, that lawn stays wet all night long and allows the pathogen to take hold. Now, If you don't water, am I telling you not to water? No, not really. It depends on what you want your lawn to look like in the summertime as to how much you're going to water the lawn. You can let the lawn go into a little bit of dormancy, but if you let it go into dormancy in the summertime, it's going to be brown. Okay. Also, if you're watering improperly, diseases like brown patch may be worse. But the key here is that you get your lawn thick and healthy enough so that if you do have a problem like this, that you can, for the most part, get it through the summer and do a minimal amount of seeding or whatever in the fall to bring the lawn back and make sure that the lawn recovers with fertilization and any seeding that you need to do. Okay, or you keep the sprinkler running throughout the summertime and you water properly and you apply fungicide to the lawn to abate the disease problems. So our fungicide program works fairly good, and it really stops the brown blighting that happens as a result of brown patch. So once again, moral of the story: if you're going to have a perfect lawn in the summertime, there's going to be additional inputs that you're going to need to put into it to keep it that way, if that's your expectation for the summer. Not impossible, but expect that. Okay, so I want to. Every good lawn is going to start with the soil, and I'm going to talk to you about soil testing. You who are customers have at some point had us do a soil test on your lawn, and you've gotten recommendations. Soil testing tells us important information that we like to know about your soil and its ability to support turf. Okay, there are two properties we're concerned with. First are the physical properties, and those properties are water holding capacity. That's the ability of the lawn to actually have a water bank of sorts, so that you're not watering all the time. Infiltration, that's the ability of the soil to soak up moisture like a sponge. So you've got your infiltration and then your water holding like a sponge. Your lawn is able, your soil is actually able to kind of hold a bank of water that the grass is able to take up. Needs to be said that you have to have a constant supply of water in that soil bank throughout the summertime if you're going to keep the lawn green in the summertime when it's really dry out. Okay. Then our organic matter contents is very important. Organic matter is the living organisms in the soil, including bacteria and fungi. And other organisms like earthworms and insects are important to break down organic matter, turn it into a usable source for the plants, and that nitrate is able to be dissolved in water and taken up by the roots of the grass plant. So you have to have that biological engine happening. And then your chemical properties are important, because if your chemical properties are out of balance, then that living biological engine that is so important is going to be affected. So you have to have the proper pH, and I've got the need for lime there, but I've seen pHs that are too high as well, and you have to do the opposite. You may need to apply sulfur if you're having a problem growing the grass, but the soil pH is going to tell you about that. And it's also going to tell you about your fertilizer needs. Here in Maryland, the fertilizer law requires that you cannot apply phosphorus to your lawn unless you're doing a complete seeding of the lawn, not just co-aeration and overseeding, but we're talking about probably renovation and starting the lawn over again, or if your soil test says that your soil is deficient in phosphorus. So if you're out buying fertilizer this weekend, you're going to notice a lot of materials that are phosphorus free. And the reason for that is that the fertilizer law prohibits the sale of phosphorus fertilizers unless they are noted on the bag that they're actual starter fertilizers, and those would have a high rate of phosphorus. But right there that you're not supposed to apply it unless you need it based on soil test, or you're reseeding the lawn completely. Okay. So anyway, phosphorus is that nutrient that's not needed a whole lot except for in the new seedling development. So you really don't have to enrich the soil if you've got plenty. Okay, and this is what your soil test, this is the lab that we use. We use a lab called Spectrum Analytic. The first thing that we want to look at is we're looking at this pH up here, okay, the soil pH. We want, the soil test actually says optimal is 6.0 to 6.8. We actually want to see it, you know, between 6.3 and 6.8. A few points here or there doesn't really matter. I think 5.8 is probably the limit on the low side, and 7 is the limit on the high. Anyway, that basically tells you the acidity or the alkalinity of the soil. The pH scale is a logarithmic scale, it's below 7 is going to be considered acidic, 7 is considered neutral, and then above 7 to 14 is going to be alkaline. Okay, and I think the worst I've ever seen as far as alkaline range has been an 8. The worst I've ever seen as far as acid goes has been a 3.5 pH. Okay, well, if the lab does the pH test, they're going to do a second test, and the second test is called the buffer pH. So what they do, they know that the soil pH is in the acid range, and they're going to take a sample of that soil, and they're going to allow it to equilibrate in a solution that has been buffered to 7.0. And they measure the, so by doing that, they're able to measure the resistance that that soil has to an actual pH change, where the buffer pH comes in. And by knowing that buffer pH, they're able to make the recommendation on how much actual lime the lawn is going to need to get the desired pH change. If you look down here at the bottom, this is the lime recommendation that the soil lab has given us, and basically calcium carbonate is lime. The other type of lime would be dolomitic lime, which has a lot of magnesium in it, but it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference. One has more magnesium in it. But anyway, this is how many pounds of actual lime you need to apply to your lawn per 1,000 square feet to get the desired pH change from that 5.2 up to that 6.3 area. Okay, the recommendation we're going to make, since we apply lime at 25-pound or 50-pound increments, we're going to make a recommendation here. We would take this 66 pounds and we would augment that to 75 pounds per 1,000 square feet, and our recommendation is going to be for 2 applications. Your first one would be for 50 pounds per 1,000 square feet, and your second one would be for 25 pounds per 1,000 square feet. So I hope you kind of understood how that works. The rest of these numbers, you know, I've used them on occasion. If we have a lawn that is in really tough shape, I'm able to call the soil testing lab and actually talk to a soil scientist. They're very good, and they're able to give me additional analysis and recommendations on possibly things that we need to do. So they're our partners as far as helping get your lawn going. And any soil test lab that you use should actually be your partner, and you should be able to talk to them specifically about your results. Now, the other number there that we like to look at is that organic matter, and as you can see, that organic matter is 2.9. We like to see that 4 or above, and once again, that is a measure of that living part of your soil, that organic matter, and how well your soil is able to support the grass that you're trying to grow on top of it. So. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of the chemical part. It also tells us about the phosphorus and the potassium, magnesium and calcium. These are the secondary nutrients, and they're going to tell you what type of lime, although that's not so important because there's calcium and magnesium in either dolomitic or calcitic lime. But the P level, they'll give you a recommendation on how much phosphorus needs to go on your lawn and a recommendation of how much potassium. And usually if they tell us that the lawn doesn't need phosphorus, the lawn is going to be on our regular program, which is going to supply it with the normal amount of nitrogen and the normal amount of potassium that we usually apply to the lawn throughout the year. Okay. So if you have any questions about that, you can shoot a question over to Chris, and I'll answer that after a while. So going in now, this is why pH is very important. We want the pH to be between 6 and 6.8, and the soil pH directly affects the availability of nutrients in the soil. And if you look here, right about 6.3 to 7.0, that's where most of your nutrients are available, optimally available to the grass plant. So you've got nitrogen available there, the phosphorus, potassium. Here's calcium and magnesium, and sulfur, which are all secondary nutrients. These others down here, boron, copper, zinc, molybdenum, iron, manganese, aluminum, are all micronutrients. And that's good for aluminum because aluminum, as it gets more acid, becomes more available in the soil. Aluminum is toxic to the grass plant. So you really, they just need such a small trace amount. Iron, on the other hand, is an important nutrient. You can see, you don't want to get too alkaline, or else you're going to start tying up that iron and that manganese, which are kind of important micronutrients for the grass. And then this is the living part, the bacteria and the fungi, and let's not forget about the insects, although they're not going to be quite as affected by a poor pH. But you've got to have a fairly good pH for these bacteria and the fungi to work. Notice, yeah, we have some fungi. Usually your diseases are caused by pathogenic fungi, but we need to have certain fungi which are always there that are breaking down organic matter and feeding the plant. So the idea here is you don't want to kill all the fungi in the soil. You want the good ones that are going to continue that biological process that's so important. Okay, so now let's talk about the physical structure of the soil, and you're going to want to judge this, kind of by sticking your soil test in the ground. Our best tester is our soil test probe. When we pull that plug of soil out, we're able to pretty much look at that. There's certainly some things to be said about the importance of physical properties of the soil. First thing we need to think about is the soil texture. We have 3 different kinds of soil, and they're broken up by how big the particles are. Okay. Now the first type is clay, and clay soils are very, very small and compact. Okay, that's why they use them to make bricks, because they can compact together. Believe it or not, if you look at a brick, you can notice that if you wet a brick, eventually the water's going to seep in. That's because it's so compact and held together so hard that there are small capillary pores, and it is going to get wet. But it's not going to accept. It's not going to infiltrate. The water's not going to infiltrate very well in that brick. Okay, so clay is great for tractor pulls, not for lawns. You don't want an entire clay soil, because it's just problems. Okay, you're not going to get the water to infiltrate. Sure, it's got a lot of water holding capacity, but a lot of times the water doesn't drain through to allow enough oxygen in the soil, and you just have a tough problem. So you need some clay in your soil, but that percentage should be less than the other ones. Now sand is on the other side of the spectrum. Sand is great for the beach, but it's not real good for your lawn. You're watering forever if you have a sandy soil, because as opposed to clay holding too much water, well, sand doesn't hold enough because the particle is very large, and the water just has a tendency to drain right through a sand layer. So if you take clay and sand and put them together, well, they might just work together to kind of give you the type of texture that you really want. And then in between is a texture called silt. Silt, it's important to mention that silt is very structureless, and it smears when it gets wet. It doesn't do very well at all. I think there's a hand coming up there. Now there is a mechanical test that you can do, and the instructions for this are on the internet. Basically, this is a good way to tell what kind of a soil that you have, and this is where we want to be. We want your soil to be in the loam range, and that's going to be somewhere 10 to 30% clay, 30 to 50% silt, and 30 to 50% sand, and that's going to give us the proper texture.
Yeah, we got a question here, Rick. I got a lime application recommendation from MRW when I started with them over a year ago, and I applied what was recommended back then. Should another soil sample be taken?
We recommend soil tests be done at least every 3 years. If the pH was very low, I would say below 5.8, and you've put down the recommended amount of lime, certainly another soil test a year later would tell you whether or not we're going in the right direction, and if there needs to be additional inputs of lime to come along. So my answer to that is yes, if the soil test was bad to begin with, and just to make sure. Now, soil test is $35 from us, and of course you can go down to the extension service and they'll provide you with things, but you got to take it and send it off, where we take care of all that for you and do that. But anyway, I would, if it wasn't too bad, you could probably wait the 3 years and then just do it after 3 years. Does that answer the question?
It was acidic, yes.
Okay. All right. So anyway, here's where we want to be. We want to be in loam, and loam seems to give us all the properties of the 3 different types of texture. It's going to give us a soil that's going to be kind of loose and crumbly, but it's not going to fall apart too bad. You're going to have good college. You're going to have good water holding capacity, and you're also going to have good infiltration, and you're going to have good nutrient holding capacity in a loam soil. Okay. I want to spend some time and talk to you a little bit about organic matter. We offer the organic compost top dressing, and it's very beneficial. It has a tendency to be on the expensive side because of the labor involved and because of the cost of the material. It's allowed to be more expensive because more and more people are seeing the benefit of putting compost on their lawns. So there's less and less of it. Okay. Now we prefer to use the type type of compost that comes from composted grass clippings and leaves that are fully composted. It needs to be said that the biosolids that come from the sewage treatment plants, there's only one that produces, and that's the one in Baltimore, and they ship out their Orgro product. But that has a tendency to be a little hot, and I think that it's probably got additional nutrients in it. Don't get me wrong, it makes the lawn nuclear green, but as far as long-lasting change of the structure of the soil, I think the plant compost works far better in giving you lasting change and helping to create a soil that is going to really support the grass. What are the benefits of organic compost? Well, we talked about improving the soil structure. It's going to loosen that compaction, allow for better infiltration. It's going to help with the drainage, so it's not going to hold too much water, but it's also going to help with water holding capacity. So it kind of becomes the universal fix, whether your problem is sand or whether your problem is clay. Kind of really helps to amend both types of soil, and it adds organic matter and micronutrients to the soil. Okay, so your benefits of organic matter as far as water is concerned, percolation is good in sandy soil. The particles in the pores are large, but the water retention is poor. And percolation is poor in heavy clay. Your soil particles in the pores are small. Water retention is good. Organic matter increases infiltration, so it breaks up the clay, but it also increases water holding capacity, helps the sand to hold together better, so it helps both coarse and fine textured soils to improve. Okay, now if you've ever had a new home built, you know what the builder does. Basically, he's going to dig a hole for your foundation, build your foundation. He takes that sterile subsoil and pretty much just spreads it across the rest of the lawn out there. Okay, so then he'll throw sod on top of it, or he'll hydroseed it, or do whatever, and this is what you're left with. You can see this is a lawn that obviously the person is trying to water this lawn, but for some reason you don't have infiltration or water holding capacity in some of these areas. The way that it's graded, the water is going to drain away from some of these areas. You've got hills where the water drains away. Okay, back here, if you've ever had a wood line where the grass just kind of goes up a little slope and back to that wood, not only do you get competition from those trees, but the water just drains right off of that hill, and it just makes it very, very hard to grow grass back in those areas. So compost, some areas may need to be composted every year for a couple of years to really help to amend that soil condition and to help that soil to be a better host to the turf grass that you're trying to grow on top of it.
Is this a good time to compost now?
Yes, it is a good time to compost. And you can, even if you have crabgrass control applied, the lawn can be aerated and composted here in the spring.
And then we got another one here. I read about compost made from waste paper that takes the place of peat, and it's supposed to be cheaper. Have you heard of it, and do you recommend it?
I have not heard of it. I will look into it. Waste paper. Okay, I'll make a note, and I'll make sure that I look into it. If you find anything out, please let me know. Might be more than happy.
Your composting, is aeration required?
It's best to be done. It's not absolutely required, but it's best to be done with aeration because aeration helps to incorporate the compost down into the soil. So, okay. Okay, so bottom line is we've got to learn to manage the environment that we're trying to grow grass in. It's important, we usually come in after this has all been done. So sometimes we're working with something that might be a little bit tough. But most of our situations are heavy clay soil, maybe sand down in the St. Mary's area, a little more, and then we're able to take care of things pretty much by doing compost applications and aeration and slice seeding. But sometimes you just have to work on it, and you have to work that stuff in, and we can help you with tilling. If you need to alleviate the compaction that much, you need to till. We have a subcontractor who can do that for you, and actually works the compost into the soil. So soil modifications and additions, your lime, your organic amendments, of course, fertilization on a regular basis, making sure you're grading and leveling the soil properly, installation of irrigation, and we're going to talk about irrigation systems a little bit later on. Pre-plant weed control, whether you knock the whole lawn out and start over again if you've got that many weeds, or maybe it's the type of thing where here in the spring, if you start off and you have weeds to deal with, we need to just get out there and work those weeds here in the spring. Don't worry about doing seeding. We get a lot of folks that want us to pre-emergent off in the early spring because they want to seed. And I know what you're looking at. The lawn, you've got to remember that the soil temperature out there is not optimal right now for seed, for grass to grow. And that's why you might be looking at your lawn and you're going, gee, I've got a lot of bare spots I need to seed. But 9 times out of 10, spring seeding doesn't work. Now's the time to take care of the weeds. Get some fertilizer down. It'll help the growth of the grass. It'll thicken up on its own once the soil temperature gets up to 55, 60 degrees. That grass is going to start to thicken, and you'll be cussing at it, mowing it here pretty soon because it's so thick. So it's just really important to understand that there's a time for everything, and spring is not the time to seed. Spring is the time to take care of that weed control, and that pre-plant weed control is part of your spring, because your planting is in the fall.
So a couple more questions. If I had composting treatment done in the fall, should I have it done again now?
That just depends. If we have a summer like we had last year, bad weather is the best indicator of how well your soil is. If you've got decent soil, your lawn's not going to succumb to the hot, dry periods of the summertime. But if your soil isn't good in certain spots, like that other picture that we talked about, your soil is going to show the areas that need it. So,
how about can we compost troubled areas only? How about under troubled areas with trees?
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to do that, we could certainly come out and measure just the areas that you want, and we can draw a diagram. And sure, yeah, we can do partial compost areas. Call the office, set an appointment. We'll send a consultant out to look at the lawn and make recommendations. Okay. All right. So. Let's talk about how to fertilize the lawn and what's happening. A couple of years ago, our wonderful legislature did put into effect the Fertilizer Law of 2011, which limits the type of fertilizer, specifically phosphorus, that can be applied to the lawn, and also gave us blockout dates on fertilizer. So we need to follow those laws that they've put in. So anyway, we're going to talk about complete fertilizers. Complete fertilizer is a mixture of fertilizer materials containing primary nutrients. And the primary nutrients, like I said before, are nitrogen. Nitrogen is the #1 nutrient plants need, and you can't test for nitrogen because it's always up and down in the soil. Basically, it's important to note that you do a regular nitrogen regimen, applying enough nitrogen to keep enough vegetative growth that's green on top, and that's going to feed the plant. So nitrogen is what gives you the green color and creates the vegetative growth on the top. Yes, you can overdo nitrogen, and you need to be careful not to overdo the nitrogen. Okay, phosphorus is the second number on the fertilizer bag. So, and like I said, usually you don't need to apply phosphorus. And part of the fertilizer law is that manufacturers are creating phosphorus-free fertilizer now. So you can go into the store and pretty much buy the Scott's fertilizer, and it'll be phosphorus-free. Potassium is the #3 nutrient. Those three are going to be represented on the fertilizer bag. Okay, so if you have a fertilizer that's 25-0-10, that fertilizer contains 25% nitrogen, it contains 0% phosphorus, and it contains 10% potassium. And it needs to be said here that, well, gee, that's only 35%. What's in the rest of the bag? Well, the rest of the bag has carriers and fillers. If it's a slow-release nitrogen, it may have sulfur, which is actually a secondary nutrient. So there's other things that make up that other 65% of the bag. It's not just all nutrients. Okay, so that's a complete fertilizer. Your fertilizer recommendations are always going to be expressed in pounds of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium per 1,000 square feet. Okay, so this should be pretty much your fertilizer maintenance programs. You know, I have 2.7 pounds per 1,000 square feet of nitrogen here, and that's what we do. We put down. Well, we're at actually 2.5 to 2.7 pounds. Well, we might be up to about 3 pounds per 1,000 square feet, depending on the lawn. If you think the lawn needs a little bit more, we'll put it down. If not, at certain times of the year, if the lawn's growing good, we can back off a little bit. But the 2.7 pounds comes from the fertilizer law. And the law states that you're not allowed to apply more than 0.9 pounds per 1,000 square feet of actual nitrogen. And again, that's actual nitrogen. That's actual nutrient. That's not fertilizer. That's not the fertilizer product itself. It's the nitrogen that's within that 25% nitrogen that's in that fertilizer product that you're buying. Okay. So we do 3 applications. We do about 3/4 of a pound here in the spring, which gives you green up. I think that early spring application is important. And then 2/3, you get a really good fertilizer applied in the late summer to help your lawn pull out of the summer stress. We follow up with your final application before November the 15th there in the fall. And that's the time of the year the plants are, rather than making top growth, the plants are actually taking that nitrogen and putting it into the roots of the plants and storing it in the form of carbohydrates for use later on. The 1/3 here in the early spring, like I said, we like the early date because we've got to get your lawn thickening and greening. If you wait until this here, you're going to go March and April without a lawn that's dark green. So I think it's kind of important to note that you have to go a little early with your first application if you want a lawn that's going to be green in April or March and April. Okay, lawns are really kind of starting to green up now. Once again, that soil temperature needs to get up. Once we start to see the soil temperature up, then we're going to start seeing the lawns really start to green up. So you don't want to apply it to frozen ground, and you don't want to apply it to dormant turf. If you have warm season grass, usually we're treating zoysia. We actually kill Bermuda grass. Well, we try to anyway, try to control it with a special program that we have. Folks want Bermuda suppression. The warm season turf needs 2 pounds per 1,000 square feet of nitrogen per year. Usually wait until May, and you're going to do 4 applications, kind of spoon feed it throughout the summertime. So that's the difference between warm season turf, zoysia. If you've got a Bermuda grass, I feel for you. An actual Bermuda grass lawn. Bermuda grass works great on sports fields, but I don't think homeowners really realize what it takes to have a football field out in the front yard. It's not as easy as maybe some people make it look. Okay, so there's your fertilizer bag, 25-0-10 fertilizer, and here's your calculation. Okay, so you're going to figure out what is your first question you have. What's your desired rate? How many pounds of actual nitrogen? Again, this is not pounds of fertilizer product. This is pounds of actual nitrogen that you need to apply to the lawn at that given application. Okay, so desired rate of nitrogen divided by the percentage on the bag is going to equal the number of pounds of the fertilizer product that you're going to apply per 1,000 square feet. Okay, so the 0.9 comes from our wonderful fertilizer law. Why they couldn't make it 1 pound, don't ask me, I don't know. They made it 0.9, so anyway, if you can get that close to it, that's great. But if you take 0.90 and you divide it by 0.25, you're going to come out to 3.6 pounds per 1,000 square feet of actual fertilizer in this bag that you're going to apply to the lawn. If your lawn is 5,000 square feet, you're going to take 5 times 3.6, and you need to take 18 pounds of that fertilizer out of your fertilizer bag, put it in your spreader, and try to spread that across your lawn. Okay. If you want 3/4 of a pound per 1,000 square feet of nitrogen, then you're going to do the same math. 3/4 divided by a 0.25 equals 3 pounds per 1,000 square feet. So at that point, you're going to put 15 pounds of this fertilizer down on a 5,000 square foot lawn. Okay, and then if you want a half a pound, if you can get 2 pounds per 1,000 square feet out of your spreader, that's good. You might get that out of a drop spreader, I'm not sure, but it would almost be better to drop this number so that you're putting down more pounds of product, and then that way you would be able to get closer to that half pound per 1,000 square feet of nitrogen. But if you use this fertilizer calculation with any kind of fertilizer that you buy, this could be 18, this could be 15, this could be well, it won't be as high as 30. Probably the highest is going to be about the highest is going to be 30. But then there's not going to be any other nutrients in there. But when it comes down to it, you can do this math with any fertilizer product that you need, and you'll always come out to the same thing, telling you how many pounds per 1,000 square feet. Okay, so the next part of the equation is figuring out how big your lawn is. And it's basic geometry. You're going to go out to your lawn, you're going to measure the different areas, or you're going to measure the whole area, and then you're going to try to take your house and everything off. And we have online tools now that really help us. If you've got Google Earth, you can go in there with this tool and you can measure your whole property and come up with a measurement, and then you can take your house off, and it comes pretty good. So if there's one thing that I want you to learn, if you're doing your own lawn, you really need to start practicing and putting down the right amount of nitrogen on the lawn, because certainly if we're overdoing the fertilizer and the grass isn't taken up, it can be available to run off and go down the storm drain. So try to follow some best management practices and know what you're doing out there when you're fertilizing. Do your calculations, measure your lawn, know how big the lawn is, and you're going to save money too, because you're not going to buy as much fertilizer. Don't go in and buy the 50-pound bag of scotch that's on special that's it's not a special if it's gonna sit in your garage for 3 years, and you're gonna end up taking it to the dump on Saturday. So so just be aware of what you're doing and try to make some good decisions if you're doing it yourself. Okay, you got a question?
Yeah,
10. Oh, okay. All right, so let's get into weed control. I have 10 minutes left.
He likes to talk.
Growing a healthy, dense, vigorous turf is one of the best methods of excluding weeds. Okay. Now, these are your principal causes for poor lawns: poor quality seed, close mowing, improper fertilization and lime, improper watering, droughty or poorly drained soil, shade, too much traffic, or insect and disease damage. Okay, remember, I need to add something to this, and that's the seeding at the wrong time. The wrong time is in the springtime. I'm not going to say that spring seeding fails all the time, because that would be an untrue statement, but I'm going to say that spring seeding fails most of the time because A, you can't control the weeds and seed at the same time, and B, the lawn comes up, but it doesn't have enough time to really become established and get its root system going before the hot weather hits. So you end up losing it, and you end up getting a bunch of weeds coming in. So weed problems are often indicative of these problems, and serious problems need to be addressed. This is a seed tag. When you're out buying seed, you need to look at the tag. Okay. First, other ingredients. The other crop seeds. Okay, that O right there needs to be an A. Okay, it's not other crop, it's other crap. That's very important, because this could be annual bluegrass, this could be rough bluegrass, which is a problem that's really getting started out there. We're seeing these patchy lawns coming up with the rough bluegrass, and it's hard to control. Orchard grass, there's all kinds of stuff that can be in that. So try to get something that's 0% other crop seeds. They don't have to tell you what it is either. Weed seed should be as close to 0 as possible. Anything over 0.01 is you're buying a bag of weeds, and you should have no noxious weeds in that tag. And your germination percentage should be very high. Notice this is if you see a bag of seed out in the store that's got 2010, that bag's 6 years old, it probably won't germinate. So you want to make sure that you buy seed that is definitely within the first couple of years. Don't let it sit in your shed too long.
Somebody wants to know if it's okay to mow their lawn now if it's about 5 inches or more.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to get to mowing. If it's 5 inches, you need to mow it. And you're going to cut off a lot of that yellow stuff that's on the top, and you're going to notice that it's going to stimulate your lawn to grow and thicken up. So get out there and get it mowed this weekend, or as soon as you can. It's going to be kind of rainy the next couple of days, but try to get it mowed. Okay. All right. So now is the time to control crabgrass. And no, you can't seed and put crabgrass control down at the same time. It just doesn't work. Crabgrass control, the way it works is it creates a gaseous barrier in the soil, and when seed germinates, it hits that gaseous barrier, and the plant is killed. So that's just like your perennial grass seed is the same as crabgrass seed, and you're not going to get your grass up. And like I said, you need to control the crabgrass now. This is our priority. Okay. Crabgrass, goosegrass, foxtail, and summer annual weeds. These are two others that come in, and there are annual weeds as well. Crabgrass and foxtail begin to germinate after March 15th, April 1st. And as I alluded at first, I think we got a couple extra days because of this cool, cloudy weather, because crabgrass is going to start germinating. So, you know, if you are doing it yourself and you're going to plan to get your crabgrass control down, you really need to think about getting it down here in the next couple of weeks. If not by Easter, shortly thereafter, you need to have that crabgrass down, because that barrier needs to be in the soil when the crabgrass seed starts to germinate. Okay, and that takes a couple of days for it to start to do its thing. So, and that's pre-emergent. Okay, so we're going to talk about pre-emergent herbicide. It needs to be applied prior to seed germination. and it's more effective and easier to apply. We actually are going to do 2 applications this year. We're going to do one in early spring, one in late spring, and our product of choice is a product called prodiamine, which is very effective against the crabgrass. Once it comes up, it does a very good job. And we'll do one with the spring application early on, and we'll do one with the later spring application. You get just as good a control if applied prior to seed germination as you do with the thiopure. The thiopure is a very good product, and I love it, but it has a tendency to be rather expensive. But both of these can be found, in the store. Now, the post-emergent product that we use after crabgrass comes up, and this will be for customers who are starting our service later on, is a product called quinclorac, and you'll see it on the shelves mixed with some of the broadleaf materials, and it'll be called Q4. Okay, so this is applied after the emergence to actively growing weeds, and the key there is actively growing weeds. They have to be growing in order for your herbicides to work. Okay, so this picture was taken several years ago, I think 2008. It was taken it was taken on April the 1st, and you can already see this is crabgrass. You don't even notice it now, okay, or the 1st of April. You only notice it July the 4th when it becomes so ugly. But this is too late to apply pre-emergent to. This is a post-emergent situation. Okay, so it's important that if you're going to get pre-emergent control, that it get down on a timely basis. We're out there trying to get our first applications down and get that crabgrass preventer down now, and we'll probably be done with our first application by the first week of April. So, okay, and then the other type of weed control is selective broadleaf weed control. This is for things like the dandelions and a lot of your perennial weeds, summertime weeds like dock. It's important to follow this guide as far as what type of method you're going to use. Now, if you only have a couple of dandelions, you might just remove them by hand. I mean, if there's a weed out there that's bugging you, get a screwdriver and pull it out of the ground, and it'll be gone. A lot of times, my guys, if there's just a few weeds in the lawn, we actually have a dandelion picker, and instead of applying a herbicide to the lawn, we'll just go out and we'll remove it by hand. A lot of our lawns are weed-free because of the weed applications that we do throughout the year. So selectively, you can get a hand can and selectively go out and spot treat the weeds, just hitting the weeds that are there at the time. Or if your lawn is in really tough shape, you're doing a blanket application over the entire lawn. Okay, waiting and renovating the lawn in the fall, applying Roundup and completely killing it, or planning to sod it in the spring. I mean, you really got to have a bad lawn, I think. Something that's, you're going to kill all the weeds, but then you're going to be left with bare dirt all summer. And that rarely is going to happen. There's usually some good grass there. But, this is an option. We'll make good recommendations. If you have us come out and give you an estimate, we'll make good recommendations on what should happen. So if you decide to use control products on your lawn, it's so important to read the entire label. People make a lot of mistakes. Make sure that you're not applying, if you want selective control of weeds, you don't want to use glyphosate because it is not a selective. It is it'll kill everything. So if you've ever made that mistake, it's one of those things that you probably never make again. So for your application, you can blanket applicate the lawn, you can spot treat it for the weeds, or again, you can go out and pull weeds by hand if you want, and save mixing up the herbicide sprayer. This is what weeds look like with most conventional products that can be used. And the common products that you're going to use for broadleaf weeds is going to be these: 2,4-D, dicamba, MCPP, triclopyr, and sulfentrazone. It's going to be usually it's going to be a blend of these. 2,4-D, dicamba, and MCPP are very common blends. This is your Weed Be Gone product that you're going to find on the shelves. And I think the key to this is probably mixing in. You might mix in a little bit of dish soap to the point where it doesn't foam up, but it'll help it to stick to the plant. And these are growth hormones. They make the plant grow itself to death is basically what it does. Triclopyr is a very, very good product, and you can find this out on the shelves as well. It's a little more on the pricey side, but it's going to take care of the tougher weeds people call ground ivy, creeping Charlie, and violets and stuff. Triclopyr is going to take care of those. And there's also a brush killer that has triclopyr in it. It's very good for those berry bushes, those sticker bushes and things. And it'll knock poison ivy on its hind end. It just really does a good job. So then sulfentrazone, this is the main ingredient in our broadleaf herbicide. Our broadleaf herbicide combines sulfentrazone, 2,4-D, dicamba, and MCPP. And the sulfentrazone actually gives us control over yellow nutsedge. Yellow nutsedge is that weed that grows tall and light green in the summertime, and last year it seemed to be tough to control. So anyway, you can find, these are the common names. This is not the trade names. I'm not here to push anybody else's product but my own. You have to look at the chemical names on the bottle in order to shop for these. Okay. All right. So when you're using broadleaf weed control, make sure you read and follow the label directions. You really have to be careful. Again, make sure you're not buying a product that has glyphosate in it if you're applying to an established lawn. It's very, very important not to do that. Spray when the temperatures is over. That's Roundup, by the way. Glyphosate is Roundup. I need to say that. Spray when temperature is over 60 degrees and the weeds are actively growing. Don't spray when the temperature is over 85, as turfgrass damage may result. Now, if you're spot treating the lawn, if you're not out there really nuking the lawn for your broadleaf weeds, and usually you're not going to have to do that in the summertime anyway. It's important to note that if it's dry out, the weeds aren't growing, you have to have actively growing weeds in order for the products to work. And you may do some damage if you make too heavy of an application. So spray when the soil is moist and the plants are growing vigorously. Do not apply herbicides during droughty periods when the soil is dry. We don't really have a lot of control over the mowing 1 day prior to and after. Usually, if the lawn's mowed on a regular basis, that's fine. We usually get in and we've never had a problem. Spray formulations are better than granular forms. You can get the weed and feed product, that makes it easy, but you better make sure that you either water the lawn ahead of time or you do it early in the morning so that you take advantage of that dew, because that granular needs to land on the leaf, stick to it, and then dissolve right there. So it's better to use a liquid product. They should be applied in the presence of moisture of the granular products, and ornamentals and vegetables can be susceptible. You can't kill them with these. Keep in mind, your ornamentals are the very broadleaf plants that you're trying to control here. So these materials are going to affect them as well if you're not careful. Okay. I'm going to go into watering. In order to maintain satisfactory top growth, there must be adequate moisture in the root zone. Your symptoms of drought stress is grass color turns bluish gray, then brown. Grass does not bounce back after walking on it. These symptoms indicate the need for irrigation and is more effective to water turf by the need and not by the rule. So this is what your lawn looks like when it needs irrigation. This is when you should get the sprinkler out and start watering it. And I recommend to customers that they water when it needs it, not necessarily turning the sprinkler system on and just letting it babysit the lawn 2, 3, 4 times a week. So best time to water is when it needs it. Morning is best in the summer between daybreak and 10 a.m. Evaporation is less in the morning. Heat and high humidity at night encourage disease problems and weed encroachment. Remember that disease picture we talked about. If the nighttime temperature is below 65, it's okay to water at night. Okay, so leaf wetness, high humidity, and temperature at night are the major reasons for summertime disease problems and crabgrass. Midday watering will require longer watering due to evaporation. So, and the public perception is that turf grass is wastewater. Well, turf grass doesn't waste water. We waste water. This is a picture of a shopping center, and it's pouring down rain, and of course, they have no rain stat here, so the sprinkler is going on. It could be going off just at the time when it started to rain, but you get the picture. Okay, and then once again, it's the commercial properties that have an issue. They don't watch their sprinkler systems. They have broken heads. They're wasting water. It goes down the drain. It's important that we make sure that we take care of our damaged equipment and we know how it's working. Okay. Mowing, I tell you, if there's one thing that people do wrong, it's mowing. And the biggest thing is you have to mow it between that 3.5 and 4 inch. There's no getting around it. You've got to mow it high. Okay. Mow the lawn at 3 to 4 inches. Never let the lawn get too tall. Confirm the height of the grass with a ruler. Be sure the blade is sharp and is installed properly. Do not mow in the middle of a hot day. Mow in the AM or when the sun has set. And don't move across the lawn too fast. Be aware of what you're doing with heavy equipment. If the soil is wet, you might want to wait a day or two before you get the John Deere out because you can cause soil compaction in the summertime. And again, that sprinkler system should not be running 15 minutes every day. You need to try to water more by need rather than watering by regular. Don't scalp the edges when you're using a string trimmer. I can't tell you how many people call us up, complain about crabgrass. We go out and we look at it, and they've just trimmed the edges all the way down to the dirt, and that's where their crabgrass is. So you need to be aware of what you're doing with that string trimmer as well. Okay, and then leave your clippings down. Grass cycling is fast, it's easy, and it's better for your lawn because you're pushing all of that moisture. The grass blade is 80% moisture. You're dropping that right back down on the lawn, and also those tender grass blades break down and they continue to feed all those hungry microorganisms down there that's actually feeding the grass blade. So leave those clippings down. Use a mulching mower. Okay, and it's important to note that inside those grass clippings is plenty of nutrients too. So it's important that that be moved back into the lawn where it's going to be filtered out. Okay, so just remember, everything that's out here in the gutter can have a tendency to go down the storm drain. And depending on where you live, your storm drains may go right into the creek. This is Fort Washington, and I think their storm drains go right into Swan Creek down there in Fort Washington.
People got to remember now when they're putting fertilizer on their lawn
to make sure that you blow it back onto the lawn. So,
yeah.
Okay. All right, so everybody's got, this is the bane of everybody's existence, and I'm sorry to say, I have no panacea for moles. We have a mole suppression program, and that's about all it does. It'll suppress the moles. But moles are insectivores. A lot of people think that they have, the reason they have moles is they have grubs. Well, if you call me in the middle of July and you tell me I have grubs and you put your grub control down, I'm going to tell that you don't have grubs. Do you have well, I have moles. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean you have grubs. Grubs eat all kinds of insects, and their main food source is actually earthworms. So that's good. You want earthworms in your soil, and you don't want to go out there and nuke your soil simply because you have moles, because you're going to kill these guys, and they're really important to the soil. Control method should be concentrated in active tunnels if you're using baits and traps. Now, of course, the castor oil products that you can apply to the entire lawn, they'll work somewhat. They actually do, but they're just not going to keep them out for a long length of time, and you have to make many applications to make it work. So these are options. You have to, usually you're going to see their active tunnels along the driveway or the sidewalk, or in a straight line someplace coming from their burrow. Once one mole is eliminated, another is usually going to take its place. Moles are solitary animals. They are going to fight to the death. If one comes into another one's territory, unless they're mating, one of them's not leaving. So it's important to note that you don't have an army of moles. You probably have one mole for every 1,000 square feet out there, or something along that lines. Okay, and then they'd be considered beneficial if they didn't damage the lawn, because they actually do tunnel rather deep into the soil. So might be the type of thing that you just have to sort of live with it. There's Mr. Mole right there. There's another ugly creature called a star-nosed mole. This is the eastern mole. And they have these great big claws, feet up on the front there, and he's got 24 hours a day to dig. And usually, his metabolism is very fast, so he's looking to eat plenty of earthworms. Okay. Now there's grubs. Once again, you have to check for grubs. If you have grubs, you need to treat. But just because you have moles doesn't mean you have grubs. Okay. Earthworms are the major food source for the mole, and that's what his tunnels are going to look like. I've got them in my backyard, and we're spraying mole repellent on my backyard. So, it's just the type of thing, or sometimes. Now, right now, you might be seeing them worse because the grass isn't growing, but once the grass starts to thicken up, you'll probably see it mask a lot of this. There's the spike trap. This has been around for probably 100 years. It's got a spring-loaded trap, and there's spikes on the bottom. Once again, this needs to be placed in an active tunnel, and once you get rid of George, Charlie's going to come in and take his spot. So you have to continue to be persistent. The key to mole control is probably persistence and reducing the population that's in your general area. Here's another newer type of trap, and I think it probably breaks the neck of the mole as he runs through the tunnel. So this is kind of how the his site works. He's going to use these tunnels regularly, but then when he gets out into the feeding area, he's going to abandon these tunnels rather quickly once he uses up all the food source. Okay, so once again, you got to identify where these active main tunnels are. All right, so getting down to the end here, it's important to read the label once again, and don't go out this spring and buy glyphosate thinking that you're putting dandelion killer on your lawn. You're putting lawn killer on the lawn. That's the third time I've said that. So just remember, Roundup is a total vegetation killer. It's going to kill everything. Don't spray it on your lawn. Take a soil test. Measure your lawn. Fertilize wisely. Follow the law as we talked about. Clean up the impervious surfaces, the streets, the sidewalks, and your patio of materials. It'll also help keep it from getting on the dog's feet and dragging it in the house. Grass and organic debris needs to be cleaned up after mowing, and you also want to keep the debris out of the gutter that's in the front of your house. So keeping that clean really helps the environment and the water quality a lot. Mow the lawn at the proper height, return your clippings, and conserve water. And don't let anybody tell you that you can't have a beautiful lawn and landscape. If you follow best management practices, we can have clean water, and we can have a nice Potomac River and Chesapeake Bay, and still have a beautiful lawn and landscape. So call us at MRW Lawns. I know that some of you have our service. We're here to help you with all your lawn and pest control needs, whatever you need. And I'll take a few questions. So.
Sure, yeah, we got a few more here. If you remember the photo where you had the slope and it was a single house, and on the right-hand side there was a slope and it was kind of brown grass and all. Somebody wants to know, how do you address the problem shown in the picture in the beginning under the trees with runoff?
Well, the first one, I would probably go in there with some topsoil. I might have to assess how many trees are up there, and that's in the Bannister neighborhood of St. Charles, so you actually would have to get a permit to go in there and take out a tree or two, and that might be what it takes. More than likely, that's a rental house, and the homeowner doesn't do anything to the lawn, so the renter, of course, isn't going to do anything. So you might be able to get something to grow up underneath those trees, but you kind of have to assess it. You may need to use a shade mix that has shade-tolerant grasses to grow up underneath those trees if you've got enough sunlight getting up underneath there to begin with. But I would think about taking out a few trees, adding some topsoil, tilling compost in, raking it down real good, getting the lawn started, and then seeding it a couple times afterwards to help the lawn to thicken up. And usually it takes about 2 to 3 years to really get a good lawn established if you're persistent.
Okay, we got somebody who tilled their backyard lawn and reseeded it last October. Is it safe to use weed and feed fertilizer now in the next couple of days?
Yeah, last October was a great time to seed your lawn. I mean, the seed just exploded out of the ground. So I would say yes, it is okay to use a weed and feed product. Remember what we said about those granular products, though. I would more suggest you get the Weed Be Gone, put it in a Hosan sprayer, and right now you're looking at probably a lot of winter annual weeds, things like bittergrass and chickweed and dead nettle, and those are weeds that can be controlled in the wintertime, and you don't have to worry about it. If you seed your lawn in the fall and you hit it with the herbicide that we do with our winter application, you don't have this problem in the early spring because it actually takes care of those for the most part. So I would say that yes, you have enough grass out there, you can hit it, but that doesn't stop there. You need to control your crabgrass, which isn't there yet, and you have to do a combination of weed control over the next couple of months to knock those weeds back.
And then somebody wants a copy of the slides.
I'll make them available. I'll put them up on the website, and I'll try to. Can we make that available on the website? We'll make it available on the website.
It will have a recording and the slides on one page. Okay.
Give me a day or two.
All right, I think that's it.
All righty. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and I'll send you a special thank you through the email. You can look for that.
All right. Well done. Thank you, Jason. Thank you very much. So everybody have a great night.
Yeah, everybody have a great night.